Hey, what's up, all you few people who dare watch the history portions with me? I am back with another reaction video, and you already know what it is. It's gonna be the history portion to the song Attero Dominatus. Yes, and I do like to keep the intros nice and short for the history videos. I haven't said that in so long. Wow, I'm so excited to listen. Oh, actually, I gotta get my pen. I think I told you guys in the other songs, I'm gonna start writing down certain facts and stuff, so that way I can look back and remember. Because sometimes if I hear the song, I'll remember what the history portion is about. But if I just look at a title name, like let's see, okay, that doesn't count. I was looking at the Metalizer album, that doesn't count. Like Primo Victoria, Counter-Strike. Just hearing the title, I don't remember what the song is about. I'm pretty sure if I listen to the track, I'll remember. But I really do like having some notes to go along with it. So that's what I'm gonna start doing. I'm gonna start taking notes as I go along. And where are my manners? Oh my gosh, appreciate my clouds out there, my Patreon supporters who decided to help support my channel and who got to see this probably way before anybody else did. Way before anybody else could. If you guys want to watch it way before anybody else, or if you just want to help out the channel, the link is down below. $3 a month. Give it a shot for 1 month. If you don't like it, please let me know why, and that way I can just improve it for the next cloud. Anyways, I like to keep my little self ads nice and short and sweet. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and shut up. Listen to some indie. Is it indie? It better be indie.
I'm Indy Nidell.
Yeah, it is.
Pat from Sabaton.
And we got Par. Anyways, I'm going to shut up so we can just hop right on in.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And I'm Pat from Sabaton, and this is Sabaton History.
The Battle of Berlin in 1945 saw Hitler's suicide and the surrender of the German capital.
And we wrote a song called Attero Dominatus about that.
And I am gonna label this Sabaton Taking Me Back to School. It's gonna be a little minute. It's gonna be a series. Even though each song has a history video, I'm gonna rename I'm probably create a playlist called Sabaton Takes Me Back to School or something of that manner, just to make it more, you know, going back to school-esque. Whatever that means.
In the winter of 1941 and 42, when the German army was driven back from the gates of Moscow, the Soviet troops who had survived the first disastrous months of the German invasion brought with them Soviet cameramen, whose footage gave the world its first look at what the Germans had done in Russia. The film they produced, known in the West as Moscow Strikes Back, was described by the New York Times Review as follows. The villages are not villages, but charred honeycombs of little low walls that once were houses, schools, or even cathedrals. But infinitely more terrible are the charnel heaps of twisted grotesques that no longer resemble human beings, the naked and slaughtered children stretched out in ghastly rows, the youths dangling limply in the cold from gallows that were rickety but strong enough. Among them wander the living mothers, their faces set in friezes of grief, and sometimes a Red Army soldier gazing on the broken bodies with a silence like flame. Over the next 3 years of fighting, any soldier fortunate enough to survive that ordeal had seen scenes like that time and again. In April 1945, those soldiers arrived.
Children. Oh my gosh.
Like that time and again. In April 1945, those soldiers arrived at the gates of Berlin.
We stand at the gates of Berlin with 2.5 million men. With 6,000 tanks in our ranks, use them as battering rams.
By the beginning of that year, Western and Soviet armies were converging on Germany. For the past 3.5 years, though, the main brunt of the fighting had been borne by the Soviet Red Army. Although the figure varies between 8 and 20 million, it is estimated that around 15 million Soviet soldiers were killed by the end of the war. It is estimated that around 15 million Soviet soldiers were killed by the end of the war. That figure does not count the many millions of dead Soviet civilians. In February 1945, the Allied leaders met at Yalta to discuss what would happen with Germany post-war. And they agreed that Germany would be divided. February 1945, the Allied leaders met at Yalta to discuss what would happen with Germany post-war. And they agreed that Germany would be divided into 4 occupation zones, British, American, French, and Soviet, and that Berlin, the capital, would likewise be carved up into 4 sectors. Despite this, And as the victorious outcome of the war began to appear more and more certain, mistrust between the Allies had begun to grow, and military leaders on both sides feared that words on paper would mean little without boots on the ground to back them up. Joseph Stalin organized a general Soviet offensive to drive as far into Germany as possible, and played upon the rivalry between his two top commanders, Georgy Zhukov and Ivan Konev, by encouraging them to compete with one another to win the glory of capturing Berlin. Encouraging them to compete with one another to win the glory of capturing Berlin. In the West, Winston Churchill reportedly urged General Dwight Eisenhower to attempt to capture the city. But Eisenhower eventually decided against such an operation, not wishing to expend Allied lives capturing more and more territory, which the Allies had already agreed at Yalta to give to the Soviets, and fearing friendly fire between Western and Soviet forces. So,
okay, interesting stuff. Did not know that Eisenhower refused to even partake or refused to help because they had nothing, you know, and they had no stake in it, because the part that they wanted to take over wasn't going to be for the Americans, it was going to be for Russia.
The Soviets, and fearing friendly fire between Western and Soviet forces. So, as the Soviet forces advanced on Berlin, Eisenhower ordered the Western armies to halt on the Elbe and Mulde rivers and focus on mopping up the remaining German forces on their northern and southern flanks. The German army in 1945 was by now a shadow of its former self, reduced in part to old men and boys. Nevertheless, they fought on, each for his own reasons. What can be said with certainty is that most everyone was afraid of the Russians, afraid of what would happen to them in Russian captivity. And
weren't they called the Bear Army, the Red Army? I mean, that just strikes, oh dang. That's just, I mean, just when you hear about it and then you see them coming, yeah. And then not only that, your army's getting their butts kicked at that point, so yeah, I can see how fear will spread.
Was afraid of the Russians, afraid of what would happen to them in Russian captivity, and afraid of what would happen to their families once the Russians were given the opportunity for revenge. Those veterans remaining from the campaigns in the East who had seen and perhaps taken part in the atrocities there had little reason to doubt the rumors of impending Soviet vengeance.
The price of our war must be paid.
And afraid of what would happen to their families once the Russians were given the opportunity for revenge. Those veterans remaining from the campaigns in the East who had seen and perhaps taken part in the atrocities there had little reason to doubt the rumors of impending Soviet vengeance.
The price of our war must be paid. Millions of lives has been lost. The price must be paid by the men that started the war in the 30s.
The Red Army operations took the shape of two great offensive lunges. The first was the Vistula-Oder offensive from January 12th to February 2nd. Zhukov advanced in the center, while Konev advanced in the south. Following this, Soviet forces moved rapidly across Poland until they halted along the lines of the Oder and Nisse rivers, with bridgeheads established across the Oder some 70 kilometers east of Berlin. Although the city was undefended at this time, Zhukov gave the order to halt, as his northern flank was threatened by the German Second Army. Clearing out these forces was accomplished between February 24th and April 4th, with the Second Army being surrounded and mostly destroyed in Gdansk. With his northern flank secure, Zhukov could now prepare for the final frontal assault towards Berlin. However, the delay had given the Germans time to rebuild their defenses along the Oder River. On March 20th, German General Gotthard Heinrici was appointed commander of them. He assumed that the main Soviet thrust would be across the river along the axis of the main east-west Autobahn. Being vastly outnumbered, he planned a defense in depth, deploying only light forces along the riverbanks, while the main defensive position was established on the Zilov Heights, overlooking the road 17 kilometers to the west of the river. German engineers turned the Oder's floodplain into a marsh by breaching a reservoir, while on the heights they constructed 3 defensive belts with lines of trenches, bunkers, anti-tank guns, and ditches. As expected, Zhukov concentrated his attack on the section of the line opposite the Zilov Heights, but the overall redeployment left gaps in the Soviet lines, allowing what little remained of the German Second Army to escape to the west. The Red Army forces had between them 2.5 million men, 6,000 tanks, and over 7,500 aircraft.
Man, that's quite a force.
They were opposed by about 760,000 Germans of Army Group Vistula in the north and Army Group Center in the south, with about 1,500 tanks and 2,200 aircraft between them.
Dang, talk about being outnumbered, huh?
The Berlin strategic offensive began April 16th with a massive artillery barrage against the German positions.
Marshals who call soldiers, certainly Berlin on the plains. Disregard the losses, the cities are
So it was like I said, it was the Russians that actually reached Berlin first.
to take.
Despite their advantage in firepower and numbers, though, advancing proved difficult for Zhukov's 1st and Rokossovsky's 2nd Belarusian fronts in the marshlands created by the German engineers. Frustrated and behind schedule, Zhukov threw in his reserves, committing to massed human wave assaults, which led to heavy Soviet casualties. Meanwhile,
He just threw the man as a meat grinder out of frustration. Just goes to show you, man, sometimes even though you don't have the resources, the men, the vehicles, the equipment, you can use the land around you to really halt the enemy. And that was actually genius, creating marshlands to slow down the army. And that also frustrates the opposing leaders. And during that frustration, during anger, you make mistakes. Like doing that, just throwing your men out there, just rushing them out there to be slaughtered. I mean, hey.
Konev's 1st Ukrainian to heavy Soviet casualties. Meanwhile, Konev's 1st Ukrainian front had made progress in the south against weaker opposition by Army Group Center. And following the capture of Forst on April 18th, the remaining elements of the German 9th and 4th Panzer Armies defending the Zilov Heights were forced to withdraw or risk being outflanked from the south. But their withdrawal left the way open for Zhukov, who now moved to trap the German forces in a pincer movement with Konev's front. As for the Western Allies, they had halted on the Elbe River.
I was like, where have we been this whole time?
Thanks to captured documents, the Germans knew that they were unlikely to advance any further in the immediate future. Hitler ordered General Walter Wenck's 12th Army, currently fighting the Americans, to head east to link up with the 9th Army as it retreated west, after which the two armies together would relieve Berlin. However, by April 23rd, the 9th Army had been completely cut off, as we saw in the episode Hearts of Iron about Walter Wenck. And by the 24th, the encirclement of Berlin was complete. Wenck chose to force open a corridor which would allow the breakout of the 9th Army and the evacuation of civilians from the city, then to make for the western lines with as many civilians as they could bring with them and surrender to the Americans. On April 22nd, Hitler had ordered...
Interesting how they sent them to the American side to surrender. Probably they knew, well, I'm not going to say that Americans are more like civil in any way, but they did create some, some despicable acts as well. But I guess they were more tame as to maybe the stories they heard from the Russian side. So I guess they chose the safer side to surrender to.
And surrender to the Americans. On April 22nd, Hitler had ordered General Helmut Weidling to be shot for allegedly retreating from the enemy. As it turned out, Weidling had not in fact retreated, and when he showed up at the Führer bunker to tell Adolf Hitler that much, Hitler was apparently impressed, and the next day, he appointed Weidling as the commander of the Berlin defense zone. He showed up at the Führer bunker to tell Adolf Hitler that much. Hitler was apparently impressed, and the next day, he appointed Weidling as the commander of the Berlin defense zone. Weidling had under his command a motley assortment of approximately 45,000 Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS troops, 40,000 Volkssturm militia, and various other units formed from the Hitler Jugend and local police. They were surrounded by around 1.5 million Soviet troops. The result was 9 days of brutal house-to-house fighting, during which the German forces, though massively outnumbered and also outgunned, still managed to inflict heavy casualties on the Soviet attackers. The two Soviet fronts attacking Berlin, having collaborated to achieve the encirclement, promptly resumed their competition with renewed vigor, each fighting to reach the city center before the other.
I would expect, I could see how that would reinvigorate, because when it seems like you're beating them down, it's like, okay, it's almost there. We're already in the city. Well, close to it, or at least on the outskirts, already circled it. We're there already. So that'll be like, you know what, just this last couple pushes and it's done. Not only like one of them, they're going to achieve like the goal of reaching Berlin first, the war will be over. So of course that reinvigorates something. My cat just sneezed. I don't know if the mic picked that up.
Adolf Hitler, having chosen to remain in the city rather than flee, committed suicide on April 30th. General Wielding ordered the remainder of the garrison to attempt to break out towards their western front lines.
I wonder if he knew that Hitler had committed suicide at that point.
Handful would successfully surrender to the Allies, while the majority were killed or captured by the Soviets. On May the 2nd, General Wielding ordered those units who remained in the city of Berlin to surrender, and he surrendered to Soviet General Vasily Chuikov in person and in writing that morning. Chuikov's 8th Guards Army was part of Zhukov's first Belarusian front.
So Zhukov won the competition, eh?
As the Soviet army entered the ruined city, the civilian population was subjected to a wave of rape, pillage, and murder which continued for several weeks. While the exact figures are far from certain, it is believed that civilian deaths exceeded 125,000, though the extent to which these figures were attributable to what would today be called collateral damage rather than simple murder cannot be determined. Additionally, approximately 100,000 women were raped in Berlin out of approximately 2 million raped in the entire country during the final 6 months of the war.
Wow.
On the other hand, it should be noted that under the direction of Zhukov, efforts were made both during and after the battle to ensure that the civilian population of the city was provided for and that vital services were restored.
Of course, no matter what he says, Zhukov, no matter what he says, there's going to be soldiers who, since there's nobody around, they're going to go AWOL and break away from, like, not helping civilians. Because remember, these are citizens that they've been fighting, not just the citizens. Yeah, they're fighting the citizens of a country. No, I'm sorry. The citizens belong to a country that they've been fighting for. So they're going to treat the citizens like they would treat a soldier. And they probably wouldn't like the fact that now they got to treat them good, considering that they're the civilians are the ones that are rooting the army that destroying their kin, their men, their brothers.
German military deaths in the course of the whole operation totaled around 100,000, while the Soviets suffered approximately 80,000 killed and an additional 280,000 wounded. The end of the Battle of Berlin was shortly followed by Germany's unconditional surrender. On May the 6th at Rheims, Alfred Jodl offered to surrender all forces fighting the Western Allies, but Eisenhower told him it must be all forces on all fronts, or the Western Allies would close their lines and all surrendering would be done to the Soviets. Admiral Karl Dönitz, leader of Germany after Hitler's death, authorized that, and just after midnight, Jodl signed it. The next day, German representatives went to Berlin and signed another surrender in front of Zhukov, whose army had won the race to Berlin. Ironically, however, Konev would have the last laugh. The glory of Zhukov's many victories turned out to be too much for Stalin's taste, and within a year, Zhukov had been banished from Moscow, first to command the Odessa district and then the Urals district, though he would be rehabilitated after the death of Stalin. Konev, meanwhile, enjoyed a long, successful, and uninterrupted career. The Western Allies, despite having occupied more of Germany than their Yalta allocations, chose to honor the agreement and withdraw to the agreed-upon boundaries. And in turn, Soviet Union would allow them to occupy their assigned portions of Berlin.
Kind of got stuck on that, how Stalin, I guess, didn't like he got too much glory, ended up banishing him. That's weird.
Berlin becomes a city of darkness as all ground communication is severed and it comes to a standstill.
Hold on, I just want to make sure I have enough space on my computer. Make sure it didn't stop recording. Nope, still recording. Okay. Good.
Attero Dominatus.
Dang.
Berlin is burning. Denique. Interimo. The night has fallen.
In the song, in the lyrics, you sing "Berlin is burning." Now, have you ever played this in Berlin?
Yes, of course we have. Sabaton has been performing everywhere in the world, and we didn't really take that much of offense when people said, "Oh, this song maybe it's too sensitive to perform in Berlin." But there was some promoters earlier who said, "Well, this is your show in Berlin, but don't play the song Attero Dominatus."
Promoters are always worried about stuff like that.
They're worried about.
Yeah, you think every nation would too. Like if you're gonna paint a country in a bad light, even though they deserve it, even though that's just what happened, you're just stating facts. You would think there's certain songs they would stay away from in certain cities and certain countries.
Politics sometimes that we are there. I mean, you know, I told you about the story when we went to Russia and a local politician thought we're gonna burn the flag. It was similar idea the first time we came to Berlin. Like you're gonna play the song Attero Dominatus and burn the German flag on the stage. And it was like,
why do people think these things of you? What have you ever done that would imply that you're going to do that?
I could understand.
People get grouped in boxes too many times. You think just because they a part of something, they're gonna sing a song that's against the city. Oh, they're just gonna go extreme. Like people are just, I don't know. People are silly.
I mean, in 2006, as this song was released, Sabaton was not that, you know, well known,
right?
And we didn't have too many fans who would kind of defend us and tell Sabaton is not about politics, they tell stories. The whole thing about it was basically like this. We had our first tour in Europe thanks to the album Primo Victoria. We are supporting the bands Ed Guy and Dragon Force. And at this...
I've heard a lot about Dragon Force. I gotta add them to my reaction. I added 2 songs to my reaction list, so they're coming soon.
Victoria. We are supporting the bands Ed Guy and Dragon Force. And at this time, the label says, we might be able to cover some of your costs on this tour if you make another album before you go out.
Okay.
And we really had to rush the album Attero Dominatus.
And what about the video for Attero Dominatus?
The video, it was our first official music video.
Yeah.
We did it with Uwe, who was a director from the band Nocturnal Rites. We didn't know what to expect at all. And he was like, you need to bring some cooler clothes than what you are wearing normally, because before this we were wearing leather pants and leather jackets, and that's our...
Not to be rude, but the typical rock look. You picture black, leather, like kind of gothish, but not the paint, you know?
Stage
standard uniform.
Yeah. Joachim bought this vest on a show in England, and just walking around, he saw that this could fit. It looks like a kind of military thing.
Yeah.
And then we thought about, okay, we get kind of a uniform. It was for the video shoot. And a couple of months later, we were sitting down at Sweden Rock Festival, and we were watching it together with some friends. And we were all like, damn, wow. It's a simple video, but we love the energy in it. And we love the look. So we...
Especially if it's your first video, it's exciting, you know? Like... I bet it's exciting.
Kept the look.
And these are my favorite part of these. I love these. I always like that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, that is all for today, but we will see you next time and every time on Sabaton History.
Attero Dominatus, Berlin is burning. Denique interimum, the Reich has fallen.
That's it for today. If you're wondering why I was holding a Kalashnikov, it was that it was first time used as a prototype during the Battle of Berlin that we just talked about. So, please don't forget to subscribe, become a patron, and see you soon.
Did not know that. That's pretty cool how they incorporate some of that, like some stuff like that into their videos. Surprised they didn't even mention that until like the very end. Because it was just sitting on his lap the whole time. I was gonna comment on it, but I was just kind of also listening. It threw me off how people, I guess, back in 2006, I guess you wouldn't think at that time it wasn't too... Well, I guess I never really got into politics until about 2010. Like, that was like, I was still in high school, 2006 to, 2005 to 2009. I was still in high school, so that didn't really... Politics didn't really enter my mind a whole lot. But I think it's really dumb how just because you make a song just doesn't mean you're against something. You're just pointing something out, you know? That's really crazy. I actually wrote, I'm not sure if I'm gonna go through everything I just wrote down. Probably because, I mean, I'm just pretty much gonna repeat all the information that they already covered. But the certain things that did stand out is I think it's pretty cool how, first of all, Stalin encouraged a competition between, I must say, I think I wrote kind of wobbly, chicken scratch. As you can see, a lot of chicken scratches. There's a guy like 2 pages worth of stuff. But it's crazy how George Zhukov, and I already forgot the guy's name, Ivan, I don't know if it's Konev or Korev. I already wrote his name wrong. I think it's pretty cool how he encouraged a competition between the two, and because of that, I don't know if it was because of that Churchill tried to get Eisenhower to do the same, but Eisenhower said, nah, I mean, why waste the resources if we're not gonna get the land? So I thought that was really interesting. What I also thought was really interesting was the very first video put out that kind of showed that the war that was really going on was the Moscow Strikes Back, showing that, I mean, just seeing the footage right there, I'm gonna have to, I don't think this video is gonna get an ad on it, or if it does, I'm gonna have to put like a little disclaimer on it. So this one might not get an ad at all. But that's really crazy how that video, I might have to look into that. I don't know if it's available on YouTube. If it is, I would love to react to it, but that's probably gonna be a Patreon exclusive. I can't put that on YouTube. It's gonna be too bad. Even though it's probably on YouTube, I don't want to put that energy out there. Or maybe I will, I don't know. It just depends on how much they go into depth about it. But just knowing that they had the very first cameraman to go out there and actually record all of that, really interesting. You know, it shows the world what's really going on. Anyway, to avoid the risk of repeating every little thing that I wrote down or everything that I just learned in the video, I think that's pretty cool. Also interesting to find out that Eisenhower demanded, not just on this front, on all fronts, stop the war now or we're gonna keep on going. So I'm not gonna say it was because of, and I already knew, I said it multiple times in other videos, that Soviet Union really played a key role in helping defeat Germany. They, like I said, I already knew they took a lot of the damage. I'm just not really sure to how much it could stand. I just know they lost a lot, and a lot of it probably, their numbers aren't even like cemented because they don't even know. They're saying it's a certain amount, but it's also estimated that's a lot higher than what the Soviets had disclosed. So yeah, I'm gonna keep the video short. I mean, it's already pretty long, 35 minutes. Actually, I have a lot more space on this computer than I thought. Hope you guys enjoyed the reaction. I certainly enjoyed the video. Stay safe out there, stay blessed, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Sabaton history. We're back, baby. We are back.